So next Wednesday we have a tutorial. The tutorial would be about we'll go through the TA will go through question 4 to 6 of problem set 2. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. So let me continue talking about real exchange rate determination. The long run, how's the real exchange rate determined in the long run, right? So last time we come up with a model. So here's the model here. Right? Oh, okay. Now, so we've come a long way, right? So we have the PPP. You remember we have the absolute PPP. We have the relative PPP. But we say empirically, both absolute PPP and relative PPP do not hold, even for a very long period of time. We find out why. It's because the real exchange rate is not constant. Okay? If the real exchange rate is not constant, then even relative PPP does not hold. Okay? So it's very important to realize that the reason why relative PPP doesn't hold is because the real exchange rate is not constant. Okay? So real exchange rate constant meaning the relative prices across countries are constant. But it turns out that this is not the case. Okay? So this is not the case, and so what's the reason for that? So one theory here is that the real exchange rate is in fact determined by the real side of the economy. Okay. So that seems to make a lot of sense, right? But then what is the real side of the economy? Okay. So real side of the economy. So then we focus on, okay, what determines the relative prices across countries? So this is the question that I want you to think about. Okay. So I want you to think about. So what happens in a real economy that would determine, what are the factors in a real economy that determines the relative prices across countries? What can be the factors? What do you think? You want to try? Huh?
I'm still thinking.
You're still thinking, okay. So this relative prices across countries, right? It depends on, of course, the productivity, the cost, how much it costs, right, to produce goods in these countries, right? And what are the goods that are produced by these countries? What are the goods produced by these countries? How is the productivity of these countries in producing these goods? This will determine the cost, how much it costs, right? Right. So it must be dependent on the cost side, the productivity of the countries, and also it also has to depend on what? When we talk about relative price, so do you still remember your principles of economics? The demand, right? It has to be demand. So actually, there's a supply side and a demand side, right? So just like that, just like in your very, very basic economics, what determines relative price has to be, both the supply side and the demand side. Okay. So the difference here is that's precisely what the approach that we're taking here. So we have a supply and a demand. We have a supply side and the demand side. But we talk about relative supply and relative demand instead of just the supply and demand. Okay? So why do we talk about relative supply and relative demand? Because we're talking about relative things. We talk about relative price. Therefore, we talk about relative supply and relative demand. Okay? In your econ principle of econ, you just talk about the demand curve and the supply curve, and you talk about price, right? That's based on partial equilibrium analysis. You just focus on one market. Okay? But if you're talking about, so we're talking about general equilibrium analysis here, really, because we have both markets have to be in equilibrium, right? You have the foreign market, you have the home market, right? So in a sort of general equilibrium sense, we talk about relative supply and relative demand. Okay. So since we have not, this course does not cover international trade, it's hard for me to go into sort of detail about comparative advantage, so in international trade, okay, if you have taken international trade, this will be a little bit more easy for you to understand, because in international trade, we always talk about general equilibrium. We talk about two countries. We talk about the relative price of the goods produced by the two countries. And this is precisely borrowing from the international trade theory here. Okay, so obviously the relative supply, okay, this relative supply curve is the supply of goods produced by home divided by the supply of goods produced by foreign. Okay, the quantity supply, I should say, is the quantity supply of a good produced by home divided by quantity supply, quantity of goods supplied by foreign. We basically use GNP to represent the total quantity supplied. Okay. They can be converted into the same currency. Okay, so let's say here, well, actually, that's right. So this is real. This is the real GNP of the U.S. divided by the real GNP of Europe. Okay, so that's the quantity. So it's a little bit abstract, right? This is a quantity. This is you kind of think of this as the, there is a basket of goods, okay, produced by the U.S. and a basket of goods produced by Europe, okay, and you evaluate them. You evaluate them in all converted into real U.S. dollars, okay. You have to compare. They're comparable, okay. So that you have to. You have. So this represents a real, okay, the real value of the basket of goods produced by the U.S. U.S. factors of production divided by the real value of the basket of goods produced by Europe, okay. Or the Europe's factors of production. Now we argue that this basket, okay, the real value of the basket of goods produced by each country's factor of production is only dependent in the long run. In the long run, it's only dependent on the technology of that country and also the supply of the factors of production in the country, which are the labor, capital, land, and all these things. it makes sense, right? It makes sense in the long run because we're talking about long run. So there's no business cycle effect. There's no unemployment. Okay, the labor is fully employed. The machines are fully employed. Land is fully employed. So that is the the productive capability of a country. So that's why it is vertical, because it is supposed to be independent of the relative price of the European good to that of the U.S. goods, right? So that's the supply. That's the supply side. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, at least, right? It's a little bit abstract, but so you can think of in the real world. Okay, so in this situation, you have two countries. So each country's residents will actually want to consume both kind of goods. So Americans want to consume some American basket of goods, but they also want to consume some European basket of goods. Europeans also want to consume some American basket of goods and some European basket of goods. So they're actually trading with each other. They're actually trading with each other, you see. So strictly speaking, we are really talking about this Q here. It should be not exactly this Q, according to my story that I just told you, this Q is really the relative prices, it's the relative price of the goods produced by the US relative to the price of goods produced by Europe. Produced, okay? But we'll continue the story, okay? Just that Q, in fact, the vertical axis actually, according to my story, is really about the goods produced by the relative price of goods produced by the U.S. To that of the price of the basket produced by Europe. Okay, so this is the YUS divided by YE, okay, just Europe. Okay, so this is a relative supply curve, and I would call this Q prime. Okay, last time I introduced it. So Q prime here is the if I may go back to that that note. I guess this is what I had last time. Yeah. So the relative price of a European production bundle to that of an American production bundle called Q prime. Okay, so this is indeed relative. I'm talking about production, right? So this is relative output, right? Relative real we call it the ratio of US to European real output. Okay? Ratio of US to European real output. Okay. So okay. Now, what about the relative demand? Well, okay, so here, what's the relative demand for goods, the world, okay, the whole world's relative demand for goods produced by the US to the good produced by Europe. Okay? It means that the demand for goods produced by the US divided by the demand for goods produced by Europe. okay? Because they're trading, remember, they're trading with each other. Europeans want to consume some American goods, Americans want to consume some European goods as well. They're trading with each other. They obviously, if American goods are relatively more expensive, then the whole world will prefer to consume more European goods, right? So therefore, this explains why this is upward sloping. Okay, so this right. So this Q prime, right? It's where the PE prime and PUS prime are the price index of goods produced by Europe and price index of goods produced by the US. Okay. When you express both of them in the same currency. Okay. This is expressed the relative price expressed in US dollar terms. Okay. This is so, but you can actually express the relative price in the euro terms. Doesn't change the relative price. Okay. So the point is that if this gets larger, it means what? It means the price of European goods is more expensive, right? If this gets larger. When the price of European goods gets more expensive, people will demand more American goods. That's why this is upward sloping. Does that make sense? Right? We just said that real exchange rate really is a very important variable determining export and import, right? So so this explains why this is upward sloping. So you are used to looking at a downward sloping demand curve. This demand curve is upward sloping just because we have flipped the price, really. So because this is talking about the demand for a U.S. good to that of European goods, right? But this price is actually the price of European goods relative to the price of U.S. goods. That's why. So strictly speaking, what you would expect is the ratio of U.S. to of U.S. goods, U.S. basket, put it this way, U.S. U.S. bundle, U.S. produced bundle. To Europe produced bundle. And if this is the let's say this is this 1 over Q prime is the relative price divided by Europe produced bundle. Okay, I just take the reciprocal, and this is the usual kind of relative demand curve that you're used to, because this is the U.S. good to European good, U.S. price, European price. So you expect a downsloping relative demand curve, but because this is 1 over Q prime, I flip it, therefore it's upward sloping. Okay, it's just like that. it make sense now? Now, one more step is there's home bias in consumption. We have to assume that there is home bias in consumption, which is actually quite true in reality. In reality, what do we mean by home bias in consumption? So Americans would tend to consume a larger share on home-produced goods in their total consumption expenditure. They spend a larger share of their total consumption expenditure on home-produced goods. Okay. This actually makes a lot of sense. It's actually true. It's true. It's very true. Every country has home bias in consumption. For I guess the reason is because it may be a complicated reason, but it's perhaps because there is because the home country has a lot of demand for certain things, and therefore the producers in that country will also tend to be relatively good in producing that goods, right? So, for example, in the U.S., there's a lot of demand for automobiles, right? Because it's a driving culture in the U.S. There's a lot of demand for automobiles, and for that reason, the automobile industry in the U.S. Used to be very, very well developed, because they have to cater to the demand for that of their citizens, right, of their residents. So so that's a logic behind home bias in consumption. See, so because of that, we say that Q and Q prime they're positively correlated. So in some sense we're saying something like, you know, if this is Q and this is Q prime, we say they tend to be lying on a line like this, right? So they tend to be correlated like that. So this is what we mean by home bias, okay? Because this Q, see this Q is the what is Q? Q is the relative price of European consumption bundle to that of an American consumption bundle. Okay, so in the extreme, if a country's citizens, sub-residents only consume the goods that they produce, then Q is equal to Q prime. But of course, that cannot be true if each country citizen only consume the goods that they produce themselves. There will be no international trade. Okay, that defeats the purpose of this whole story. The story is talking about international trade, right? So I think the best way to think about home bias is to think of the existence of non-traded goods. Okay, so there are non-traded goods. You buy some foreign goods, you buy some home-produced tradable. For tradable goods, you buy some home tradable, you buy some foreign-produced tradable. Okay, so that's why you have trade. But then you also have non-traded goods. For non-traded goods, they has to be home-produced. You see, so for that reason, you can explain why there's home bias, right? Because in addition to spending on your home-produced tradable, you have to spend on home-produced non-tradable. See, so if each country spend a non-trivial amount of their expenditure on non-tradable goods, there will be home bias automatically, right? So does that make sense? Makes sense, right? Okay. So for that reason, if this is the case, then we kind of with this one, then we therefore this plus this, okay, this plus this will give rise to this story, okay? Okay, and this is what we see here. This is what you see here. Okay, all right. So, so the real side of the economy will determine the relative price across countries, and relative price is called the real exchange rate. So in the long run, the supply of goods and services in each country depends on the fact of production and the technology, not the price. Okay. All right. So as I already said, that's home bias assumption. Then relative price of European consumption bundle is possibly correlated. Just this one. This will be home bias. Okay. This says home bias. Home bias in consumption. They are not the same, but they are positively correlated. Okay. So, in other words, yeah, this is basically what I shown in the other in the PDF files, right? So, if one treats the variable on the vertex as Q prime, then the diagram is similar to the Ricardian model. This is coming from the Ricardian trade model, okay? And from there, we get this one. Okay, so the demand, okay, the demand for U.S. produced goods relative to the demand for U.S. Produced goods depends on the relative price of these products, right? When the real exchange rate is high, then relative demand for U.S. products will be high. So here's the equilibrium here. Okay, this is the equilibrium because why is it the equilibrium? Well, suppose the relative price is here, then we say this is not an equilibrium because the relative supply is more than relative demand. Well, whenever relative supply is not equal to relative demand, what does it mean? It means that somehow the price, the markets are not in equilibrium. The markets are not in equilibrium. And remember, this is a general equilibrium model. So we are really saying that when that's a disequilibrium, both markets, both the home market and the foreign market are not in equilibrium. Okay? In this case, suppose the relative price is here. What does that mean? That means that the U.S. goods are too expensive. Okay, U.S. goods are too expensive because Q is the what's that? The relative price of the European goods, right? So so when the relative price is here, that means that U.S. goods are too expensive, and so even the Americans would like to, well, over the world, both Americans and Europeans actually want to consume more European goods than American goods, okay? So Americans are too expensive. So the demand, the relative demand for U.S. goods is just too low, okay? Right? And so in order for the market to get back to equilibrium, the relative price of American goods had to be lower. And the relative price of European goods have to be higher. And so this is the market mechanism, basically. You know, we assume that there is some auction, you know, just like the usual kind of adjustment. So U.S. goods price will be bid down, and because of insufficient demand, okay, and European goods price will bid up, and that because of excess demand, really, okay. So it sort of lead to a rise in the relative price of the European goods. Here, the American goods are too cheap. They're too cheap. There's excess demand for American-produced goods, okay? And so the market will bid down, will bid up the price of American goods relative to European goods, okay? When the relative supply matches relative demand, there is no tendency to price of U.S. product relative to EU product to change. Okay, so the reason why there's no tendency for them to change is because both markets are in equilibrium now. The quantity, the supply and demand, the quantity of supply and demand matches in both markets, in both American goods market and the European goods market. Okay, so then we can talk about some comparative statics, right? Suppose there's an increase in relative demand for U.S. products. What happened? Well, it shifts the relative demand curve to the right, right? Shifts to the right. And what happened is, shift this. So do we have any? Yeah, there is no diagram showing the shifting. Okay. So it will shift this green curve, blue curve to the right. So it shifts to the right, okay, then at the original real exchange rate, there is excess demand for American goods, so it will bid up the price of American goods. When there is increase in demand for increase in relative demand for American goods, it will lead to a real appreciation of the U.S. Of the U.S. dollar. Okay, so let me just pause here and ask you, what could cause the relative demand for American goods to increase? What are the possible reasons? I really want to hear from you. Don't be shy. Even if you're wrong, it's okay. Don't worry. Just say something. Just speculate. What could lead to an increase in the relative demand for American-produced goods? What do you think?
For example, in Japan, there was the nuclear factory. After earthquake, the nuclear factory had a leak.
Okay.
So then the demand for fish produced in Japan would increase.
Okay.
And America would increase relatively.
Oh, the demand for American-produced goods will increase because of. Let me think about it. So people demand less fish. Perhaps they don't like. They kind of try not to eat fish, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So all over the world. So we're talking about all over the world. So even Japanese, maybe you're saying, even Japanese, they try to avoid fish.
From Japan.
From Japan, right? That's interesting. That's a good point. Interesting point. So okay. So if that's just two, we're just talking about U.S. and Japan, right? So I guess in particular, Japanese will substitute away from Japan-produced fish. They that will increase demand for. Well, okay, maybe foreign-produced fish. But I mean, okay. So I think your idea, I sort of get your idea. So can somebody give me an example that is a little bit more relevant? You're going in the right direction, actually. So preference, something concerning preference.
What about quality?
Quality, okay.
Like if
yeah.
the goods in U.S., their quality is getting better, and then people would demand more of U.S. good relatively to other countries.
I think that's a good point. That's a good one. So if the quality is higher, people all over the world, if the quality of U.S. produced goods, they all increase, then the whole world will have will increase the demand for US produced goods. Just like China, I mean, it's maybe a good example because China is a developing and fast developing country, fast growing. The quality of Chinese good is set to increase over time, right? Used to be producing goods, not as high quality, but it's increasing. I mean, you can see that. So you can imagine that the whole world's demand for China-produced good will increase as Chinese good becomes higher quality. Yeah, that's a valid point, I think. So what else? What else do you think can shift the demand? The whole world's demand for a particular country's good. How about your own country's demand for your own goods? That also actually have effect. If your own if you are a large country, okay, like the U.S. or China, so if the Americans themselves somehow decide to consume more U.S. produced goods, that actually will also shift the relative demand curve for the U.S. You see? Because this is the whole world's relative demand. And if you're a large country, it shifts your relative supply, your relative demand curve as well, right? But what can cause that? What can cause Americans to consume more U.S. produced goods? Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point. Yeah, a tariff can do that. Yeah, right. What else? What else?
Trade agreements.
Trade agreements. So like what? So
for example, China agrees to purchase more U.S. beans, so the world.
Interesting. Okay. So if this is large enough, if this is really large, I don't know whether I guess it has some effect. Although I don't know how big that effect is. If China promised to buy more American-produced agricultural goods, right? That's how many? You're talking about how many billion US dollar worth of goods. It might have some effect, although I'm not sure whether it is very large. But what about your home country's own citizens increase their own demand? So for example, there is a government initiative that you have a domestic increased fiscal spending. Okay, your increased domestic fiscal spending because of some government program. For example, there's a healthcare reform. Okay, there's healthcare reform in the U.S. Where the U.S. government decide to spend a lot more on healthcare. Okay, so that means that the Americans will consume a lot more American-produced goods because this health, a lot of these health products, health-related products or medical-related products, they are actually non-tradable. So that actually may, shift the whole world's demand for American-produced goods. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so same thing with China. So for example, China is a large country. If China had some domestic economic program that increases fiscal spending in the Chinese economy, is going to increase the relative demand for China-produced goods. In fact, China has done that, in the past. I mean, they actually have very, very large fiscal spending in order to boost the economy. So that this actually happened in the real world. Okay. Okay. So, all right. Now. So I think the rest is pretty easy to understand, right? So you shift to the right, and therefore it will bit. So as a result, if there's such a kind of thing, increase in global demand for your home country's produced goods, then it will actually lead to a real appreciation in the long run. Real appreciation of currency. Okay, your good become more expensive relative to other countries. Yeah, so you may say that in the long run, if Chinese goods become higher quality and all over the world, people would like to consume more Chinese goods, then the real exchange rate of the RMB will appreciate. Okay, the RMB will appreciate in the real terms in the long run if Chinese goods becomes more preferred by people all over the world. Not to mention that the Chinese themselves, if the Chinese themselves also spend more on Chinese-produced goods, that will also lead to the real appreciation of the currency. Now, real appreciation of currency will also lead to the nominal appreciation of the currency in the long run. So this is the story that we're actually going to tell, is that the real long-run real appreciation of the currency will lead to long-run nominal appreciation of the currency. See? So this can perhaps explain why oftentimes a country that is fast-growing, a fast-growing developing country, their exchange rate will actually, in the long run, tend to appreciate. In the long run, the exchange rate will tend to appreciate for a fast-growing developing country. And that is partly because of this. You can sort of resort to this kind of explanation, actually, because the real appreciation, there's real appreciation. Okay, so, okay. So what about the increase in relative supply? Well, increased relative supply will obviously will shift the relative supply curve to the right, and it lead to real depreciation of your currency. So if the country becomes more productive, okay, technological change or for example, there's a technological change in the U.S. It will shift the relative supply curve to the right, and somehow change in increase in labor productivity in the U.S. All this will shift right then and will lead to real depreciation of currency. So U.S. goods become cheaper. Now, real depreciation is not necessarily bad, and real appreciation is not necessarily good because real depreciation actually means that your goods are cheaper relative to other goods, to foreign goods. It's not good or bad, really. It's just it's just that kind of situation. But then so you remember when you have a real depreciation, that means that your goods are cheaper relative to foreign goods, other goods. That means that people all over the world would like to buy your goods more than before. Okay. So yeah. So all right. Okay. So here's the summary. Real exchange rate is a more general approach to explain exchange rates. So both monetary factors and real factors influence nominal exchange rate. So this is the key here. So because we have the E, so instead of being P over P star, which is this is absolute PPP, we have a Q here, right? This is a real exchange rate. So in other words, if it's a monetary factor, if it's purely monetary shock, purely monetary factor, then in the long run, it would not affect Q. That's our theory. If it's purely monetary factor, then the long run nominal exchange rate is determined by just, the monetary. It will not affect Q, but it will affect P. Okay, and through P, it will affect E. Okay, if it's purely monetary factors. But if it's affecting, if it's not purely monetary factor, if it's something that affects the real side of the economy, the kind of factor that we just discussed, then it will affect Q. And when Q increases, it will actually lead to an increase in E as well in the long run. So that's why you have to break it down into two set of factors. So permanent increase in money level leads to an increase in general price level, increase in expectation of future general price level. Does that make sense? So it increases the expectation as well. So it increases the long run and also increase the expectation, the EE, or PE. Permanent increase in monetary growth rate leads to a persistent increase of inflation rate, increase the expectation of future inflation rate, right? That we already talked about. Relative demand of domestic products leads to a real appreciation, which we just talked about. So if it increase in relative demand of the domestic good in the long run will lead to real appreciation, means that this will fall. This fall in the long run, this that will lead to this to fall in the long run. So the EE will actually fall if there is an increase in the relative demand for home-produced goods. If there is an increase in the supply of the home-produced good, it will lead to a real depreciation, it will lead to a Q to rise in the long run, and also lead to a E to rise in the long run. Okay? Right? Does that make sense? So two sets of factors, monetary and non-monetary factors. Oh, actually, I have to say, okay, I'm sorry, about the supply side, about real, suppose something happened to the supply side, I have to be actually more careful, actually. If this, let's say, okay, this, it means the Q will rise, right? Okay, so according to our theory, increase Q will rise, right? But then something more complicated happened, because when it is a increase in the relative supply, so for example, suppose YUS increases, okay? So suppose the YUS increases, okay? Because let's say, for example, US productivity increases, so this increases. Now, okay, so this leads to an increase in Q, okay, no problem. So now in fact, I would use the Q instead of Q prime. But what I forgot to incorporate, what have I forgotten? If I say that increase in YUS would lead to a long run depreciation, nominal depreciation of the US dollar, did I miss something? If I say this increase, therefore this will increase in the long run? Because of this, suppose there's such a thing happening. What did I miss? Can anybody tell me? What did I miss?
Price level will change.
Okay, why? Why would price level change?
Because you have more income, so you demand more money?
Yes. Yes, yes. That's right. You demand more money, so the money demand increases. So therefore, so therefore, the real money demand increases. Therefore, the price level has to fall, because your money supply is fixed, right? But if this has increased, that means that this is fixed, right? Therefore, the price must fall, because they just have to be equal. So the price has to fall. If the price falls, you're right. So the price has to fall. This has to fall in the money market, right? So in the long run, an increase in YUS in the long run would lead to a long run decrease in the price level of the US, but it will lead to an increase in the real exchange rate. So you have two factors that are actually counteracting each other. So in this particular case, therefore, is uncertain, right? Okay, so let me see the next slide. Okay. So in this slide, okay, we say when only monetary factors change, the PP holds, and we have the same prediction as in the monetary approach, right? No change. When factors influencing real output change, the real exchange rate changes, right? So with an increase in relative demand of the measurement of the real exchange rate adjustment, but with increase in relative supply, the situation is more complex. Okay, it's more complex, as I just said. So what we shift in our S curve, due to an increase in YUS, lead to a depreciation in real terms in the long run, but also affect PUS, affect this guy, because of it's actually nothing more than what? So we have money demand, right? So here is the this is the M over P, right? And so this is the interest rate. Remember, so we have this is the L, R, Y, US. This is R, US, Y, US. And then you have this is MS over P, right? Now when YUS increases, it kind of shifts this to the right, okay? But in the long run, the price has to the interest rate, the interest rate cannot be different. The interest rate has to go back to long neutrality of money. It means that the interest rate must go back to the original level. So as a result, the price this must move to the right, which means that P must fall because MS is unchanged. MS is constant. Okay, so this means that price has to fall. Okay, so because in the right, it first move up, so in the long run it has to stay at this level, the interest rate. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so the reason why this Al's dollar is unchanged, the nominal interest, because with no inflation, nominal interest rate is equal to real interest rate, which is constant in the long run. Long run neutrality of money. Okay, so that's fine. Okay, does that make sense? So it's ambiguous. In other words, the effect of in the long run, the effect on normal interest, normal exchange rate is ambiguous. Does that make sense? So when economic changes are influenced only by monetary factors, and when the assumptions of PVP holds, the nominal exchange rate is determined by PVP. Okay. We will tend to think that the PVP would hold in the long run if the shocks are, if the changes are monetary in nature, It's closer to PVP. Okay, put it this way: it will be closer to PVP if the shocks, if the changes, if these long run changes are purely monetary in nature. Right. So the assumptions. You may ask, what are the what do you mean by when the assumption of PVP hold? Okay, so well, it's there are still not. Sometimes the PVP still does not hold because the basic assumption of PVP does not hold, such as what? Such as imperfect competition, you know, or trade barriers. Okay, so these are the factors that may prevent PVP from holding in the long run, even when the factors are purely monetary in nature. But we tend to think that these are relatively minor, so we think that they're sufficiently close. If all the factors are monetary in nature, then the PVP would tend to will be close to be correct. But if the factors are affected by real market, caused by factors that affect real output, then nominal exchange rate is not only determined by PVP, but also reflect changes in the real exchange rate. So if it's just now like this, then it has both effect on price and on the real exchange rate. Okay. So in reality, over the long run, you cannot expect that there are only monetary changes. There are changes in the real side of the economy all the time. So that's why you don't see PVP holding. Okay, you don't see PVP holding because there are a lot of changes in the real side of the economy. So this is basically a summary of what we have talked about. So I don't think I need to talk about it anymore. Okay, so let me just pause here to see if you have any question. So the rest is actually relatively straightforward. Any questions? Do you have any questions? So we have covered a lot of ground. This chapter is, I think this chapter should be regarded as the hardest chapter of the course. So you need to spend more time trying to understand it. I want to see whether you have any questions so far? No questions? Okay, so let's see. So let me just move on and to finish up the rest. So the rest is actually not that hard. So once we realize that this real exchange rate is not necessarily constant because something can happen in the real side of the economy, then we have to take that into account when we derive our equation. So if you still remember, previously we have this Fisher equation, right? So previously we have something like this. Rs minus R euro is equal to pi E US minus pi E EU, right? This is the Fisher effect, Fisher equation, if you remember, right? So, so suppose we just focus on, we don't look at this, right? These are fixed and constant. Suppose nothing changed in the European money supply. Then any increase in the inflation rate in the U.S. will increase the U.S. interest rate in the long run. This is the Fisher effect, right? But now we have to modify it because the Fisher effect, actually, this Fisher effect equation actually depends on PPP. This international version of the Fisher effect, put it this way. So we have to modify it. So the modification is to add a term here, because the Q is going to affect the exchange rate as well. So if we, in other words, if we combine the this uncovered interest parity condition with the first equation, this equation number 1. Equation 1 is actually nothing more than just taking the percentage change of the left-hand side, the percentage change of the right-hand side. So if you, okay, so first the equation 1 is coming from, so here, right? So you have the delta E over E, this is percentage change in E, is equal to percentage change in Q plus percentage change in P minus percentage change in P star, right? So if it's an expectation, so everything is expectation, then you would get, this will get that first equation. Equation 1, because you have, okay, you cannot see it here, okay, so this would mean what? So if it's so EE, this will be percentage change, expected percentage change in E would be the expected percentage change in Q plus the expected percentage change in P minus the expected percentage change in P star, which is equation 1, I think, right? No? I hope it is. Yeah, it should be. This P is the PUS, right? So this is pi E. This is pi star E. Pi E star, whatever. So that's, you get, right, so you get this one, right? Good, equation 1. And then you combine equation 1 with equation 2. So basically you just substitute this for this, and then you get this equation. So, so the difference in nominal interest rate across the two countries is not just dependent on the inflation rate, in the difference in inflation rate, but also depends on the real exchange rate. Depends on real exchange rate. Now, so what does that mean? Well, so you think about it. You know, so this original equation says that that the relative PVP holds. The if Q is constant, then we have the Fisher effect here, the international Fisher effect. Okay. If this is true, if Q is constant, nothing happened to the real side of the economy. Okay. So suppose you have a country that has very, very high inflation rate, then you expect the nominal interest rate to be high, very high. Okay, but this equation says that even if the inflation rate is not high, but if it's going to be kind of expected to depreciate in real terms a lot, it will also have very high interest rate. So, well, why would it depreciate in real terms a lot? It depends on the situation, but for example, I don't know, but let's say if the world demand for its good is low, that could be a situation. That could be a situation like that. So real side of the economy, suppose the the country's economy is declining, secular decline, then the Q can be falling, can be rising, because it can be depreciating in a long-term decline, long-term real depreciation. So that can also lead to a high interest rate. Okay, so how about the real interest difference? Well, real interest difference, real interest rate difference, right? Real interest rate is the nominal interest rate minus the effective rate of inflation. The RE is what we call expected real interest rate. Sometimes people just call it real interest rate. I mean, we should actually, you don't need to put an E there. We just R, small r is equal to capital R minus pi E. But if you want to put an E there, it's fine as well. So it's real interest rate. Okay. So what is it? So why do we care about real interest rate? Because we care about any investor will care about real interest rate instead of nominal interest rate, right? So you a saver, right? Okay, you're a saver. You want to know what is the real interest rate of your saving. You don't want to just know the nominal because you want to know the inflation, right? So that's why this is important. But then what is the relationship between the real interest rate across countries? That's the question. Okay. So the why we ask this question is, in the uncovered interest parity. Okay, we don't have it here. So the uncovered interest parity tells you R is equal to R star plus E minus E divided by E, right? So the uncovered interest parity. So it links the nominal return across countries, right? It links it through the expected rate of nominal appreciation, right? But what about real? Is there a real version? Is there a real version to this? It turns out, yes, there's a real version to it, which is called the real interest parity. So it looks actually very, very close to the nominal version of the interest parity. You just replace the nominal by the real, and then you replace the nominal by the real. You get the what we call the real interest parity condition. Okay. So the difference in real interest rate between countries is equal to the expected change in the relative price of goods and services between the two countries. So so one way to so does it make any intuitive sense? Does it make any sense to you? Okay. Well, first of all, think about if the real interest rate between two countries will be equal only if this guy is unchanged. Only if Q is unchanged, you expect the real interest rate to be equal. So so you should not expect that the real interest rate to be the same across countries most of the time, because as long as this is changing, they should not be equal. And so so don't think that, I mean, intuition might have told you that, oh, real interest rate should be equal across countries, right? Because otherwise people can arbitrage, you may say. You may have thought that people can arbitrage if the real interest rate is different. But actually, no. Actually, no. Okay? It's because people, the investors actually just care about the nominal return when converting that into their own currency. Okay. So that's the idea. So if this is equal only when Q is unchanged, and even if they're not equal, it doesn't mean that there is arbitrage opportunity. So that's the idea that I want to convey to you. Yeah. Well, let me see. Oh, that's it. Let me just. That's all I want to say for this chapter. Let's see. Maybe I can let you ask some questions. Let me see whether there's anything about do you have any questions? So there's a homework. Let me see whether we have any. I can give you some. You can talk a little bit about the homework. Okay, so here we have, problem set 2, right? Problem set 2. Oh, here, this is problem set 2. So you have already attempted 1, 2, and 3. So this is question 4. Explain how a permanent increase in national real money demand function affects real and nominal exchange rate in the long run. Okay? Do you have any question about this question? Number 5 is other things being equal, how would you expect the foreign shift to affect currency real exchange rate in foreign currency? So this is related to, obviously, what we talked about today, right? So remember, in the long run, there's neutrality of money, okay? Remember? So in the long run, the real variables, all the quantities and the relative prices will be unchanged. If it's just monetary shock. Right? So the last question is a little bit more tricky, so you need to think about it I don't have much to say about these unless you can go home and think about these questions, to try to think about it, and if you have any question, we can talk about it next time. Okay. Okay, I'm going to stop here. All right. All right. See you next Tuesday. That's going to be a tutorial next Wednesday. Where's the sign-up sheet, by the way?